place, the Transkei. Sunshine days, a leisurely pace, a tranquil lifestyle. But for Xhosa youths, a time to mature and to become men.
Young Xhosa boys, or Maidens as they're called along the Transkei coast, enjoy a wonderful life of make-believe and play without any undue responsibilities. But then comes the greatest challenge of their lives when they are faced with the ordeal of initiation. Initiation is the most dramatic stage in the lives of tribal youth and is considered most important in the life cycle of the individual. However, it must be stressed that the form it takes varies considerably from area to area, as we are about to see. With certain exceptions, as for instance among the Zulu and Pondo, initiation for males entails circumcision. But even these two tribes practice circumcision as recently as the last century. Initiation for girls, as indeed for boys, demands that they be taken temporarily from the control of their parents and placed under supervision of selected elders. And it is the task of these elders to make them more aware of various aspects of tribal culture, the disciplines and values in general, and to impress upon those who are about to get married their obligations as future husbands and wives and parents. A common feature of initiation is the practice of rituals. And sooner or later, not only the initiates, but also their parents, relatives, and friends take part in ceremonies which may be very ordinary or extremely spectacular. Virtually all initiation is accompanied by singing and dancing, and in the final stages, by feasting. It is the one period and one episode in the lives of individuals that will never be forgotten.
Taushile is 17 years old. He has temporarily left his home and his family to find his manhood along the arduous path to maturity.
Initiation always takes place in the autumn when the crops have ripened and most of the jobs around the place have been done. Fathers then approach the local chiefs for permission to have their sons circumcised and for a special hut to be built. Now, this little hut down here is like all other initiation huts, built in a secluded spot beside a stream. The circumcision is done by a local medicine man using a sharpened assegai blade. Of course, this is extremely painful, but they receive no medicines to alleviate this pain, and they may show no emotion, not even the blinking of an eye or the twitch of a toe or the clenching of a fist, because this would then be regarded as cowardice and would follow them throughout adulthood. Yeah. Now, these young men are basking in the sun, and they continue to bask in the sun for quite a few days while their wounds heal, and they have to tend to their wounds with medicinal leaves collected here in the surroundings. And of course, the whole accent is on hardship. And this man here is the overseer who is in charge of these young men, and he's responsible for their well-being and also for the hardships. So let's have a look at some of the hardships that they have to face. Well, first of all, the diet that these people eat is extremely frugal. It consists mainly of last year's maize on the cob, roasted hard like river pebbles. And of course, there's no question of their being able to drink beer, or there's no smoking for them. This is part of the ordeal. They're also responsible for all the menial jobs around here. And should they be insubordinate or insolent, then of course it's the job of this man, the overseer, to not only reprimand them, but possibly also to beat them. And the other hardships, well, there are many. Let me explain just possibly one that comes to mind right now. There are taboo words, for example. The most menial or mundane words of all, like hut and bed and tree and dog, these words are taboo. There are special words for these. But should any one of these use those words, then again, he would chastise them. So this is all part of the discipline. The whole emphasis is on discipline while they are here.
For the next 3 months, Taushile and his companions will live in complete isolation. As initiates, they are now known as abakweta. At all times, they must keep their bodies covered in white clay, white being a dominant color in ritual. Their circumcision wounds are still very painful, so medicinal leaves are collected in the surrounding bush, which will be used as a dressing. This is a time for learning about their responsibilities as adults and about customs and traditions of the tribe. For a while, they learn to live off the environment, and in the long isolation from their families, in their closeness to the wild world around them, in their companionship, and in their hunt for food, the Kwetas will transcend into maturity.
In my researches, I've experienced many wonderful ceremonies such as this one. This is a Xhosa initiation ceremony for young maidens, and it usually takes place in the winter after a girl has experienced her first menstruation. She is taken into a hut and placed in seclusion behind a screen where she is wrapped in a blanket. Her face is covered with cloth to keep her out of sight of the rest of the people. In the goat pen here, a goat has been slaughtered. This has been sacrificed and then roasted for everybody to eat. The Intonjani ceremony may last no longer than 2 weeks these days, whereas not long ago I came across one that continued almost 2 months. In former times, the female initiate was given only certain portions of the meat from an animal that had been ritually killed. Today, this can be any part of the carcass. While she eats alone in the gloom of her hut, the married women from the surrounding villages dance and sing traditional Xhosa songs.
Eight days later, the final stage of the Intonjani ceremony has arrived. The young girl's father has supplied a cow, which is ritually killed by severing the aorta, and the meat is distributed amongst all the guests. The initiate must remain in her hut. If she comes out, she has to conceal her identity completely by covering her face and body in a blanket.
Whilst it is the responsibility of the girl's father to provide the meat for the feasting, the guests also make a contribution. They help with the expenses by bringing homemade beer and other foodstuffs. This kind of sharing is a common feature of tribal life throughout southern Africa.
A day later, the young initiate will be taken out of seclusion. She will be washed in a nearby river and welcomed back into the tribe. She will receive gifts, clothing, ornaments, utensils, and to finally endorse her new status, she will even be given a new name. Driving a herd of cattle through the initiate's kraal symbolizes the passing away of her adolescence. Her childhood is gone. Her maturity has arrived. The festivities conclude with a traditional mock stick fighting, marking the end of the Intonjani ceremony. It is a happy time, for the tribe has acquired a new member amongst its adult ranks. And now, northwards, to a remote corner in the eastern Transvaal, Vendaland, where a different female initiation is taking place.
This ceremony is known as the Xhosa, and it's confined to girls who have recently entered puberty. Now, the purpose of the Xhosa is to help young girls through this rather difficult age of adolescence. And so the emphasis is on hardship and austerity and abject humility. So the parents have brought their children to this lodge, which incidentally is on the outskirts of the royal kraal of Chief Xhosa in Vendaland. And here they will be taught every aspect of tribal life, how to conduct themselves through tribal life. But in due course they will leave the Xhosa and will move to a higher initiation lodge known as the Domba, where the girls are older and where the finishing touches will be put to their training before they marry. The girls are constantly watched over by the elders in charge of the group. Among other things, they ensure that strict discipline is maintained and that the regulations of the lodge are observed.
The Domba, the ultimate phase in the initiation of young Venda girls.
The intricate steps, the arm and body movements, and the singing take time to master, so dancing is practiced daily. But this is only one aspect of the ceremony which lasts for several months. These days, many Venda girls are at school and are only able to attend the lodge in the afternoons, over weekends, and during school holidays.
Months later, the girls have perfected the dance, and it is nearly time for the ceremony to be concluded.
The Domba is held in the Khoro, or gathering place in the villages of chiefs and headmen. It caters for young girls who have been through lengthy preliminary instruction in the Xhosa Lodge. This is actually the culmination in premarital initiation in the lives of these young girls. And it is attended by parents, relatives, and friends, all of whom regard it not only as a joyous event, but also as one of the most auspicious in the lives of these girls. On average, the Domba is held once in 4 years in a particular district, because then the largest possible number of maidens poised for marriage can attend. The central feature of the Domba is the python dance, because this is the snake the people revere. So they imitate the movements of the python by way of the undulation of their arms and the dragging of their feet. Every domba has a central fire which is lit by a medicine man. Kept constantly alight, it has subtle spiritual overtones. Obviously, it also provides heat and light for the dancing which continues well into the night.
So much for the girls. What of the boys in the fertile plains of the northeastern areas of southern Africa? The young boys, the very young ones. According to tradition, they must also come to terms with their future.
We are now in Vendaland, a tribal territory in the region of the Limpopo River. The underlying principles of circumcision are fundamentally the same throughout southern Africa. There are, however, two striking differences which I think we should mention. Now, first of all, in the south among the Coza, initiates are always older, and their ages range from about 18 to 25. Whereas here in Vendaland, initiates are from 9 to about 15 years old. The other difference is that the Xhosa people are very strict about the emotion shown during the operation. A man dare not show any emotion whatsoever. But here, the little fellows don't know too much about what is going on. So when they come in for circumcision and they see all of a sudden what is happening, they become almost hysterical, and they shout and they weep and they lament. So in order to overcome this, to stifle this shouting, we always have in attendance a group of graduates who had been in previous initiation lodges, and they dance and they sing and they stamp their feet and beat drums. This is how they overcome this dreadful anguish that some of them have to go through. Twice a day, food is brought to the Murundu Lodge by the boys, mothers and sisters. The staple diet consists mainly of cold, hard porridge, but the females are not permitted to have direct contact with the initiates. Well, I'm going to kneel down among the little initiates. These are very, very young. Now, one can see that their bodies have been daubed with white clay, virtually from head to toe. And the crowd around us here, these are initiates who have been through initiation school either in the immediate past or possibly 4 years ago. And their job is to look after these little fellows and to guide them in all the various things that take place in the Murundu Lodge. The best dancers in the lodge are disguised, and then they are permitted to dance close to the women. But at all times, their identities must not be revealed. Dao. Yeah. These are the two most important men of the entire lodge. Sandanu, on my right, is one of the elders, but he is the senior elder and is known as the father of the entire Murundu Circumcision Lodge. Chikororo, on my left, is the medicine man or doctor, and apart from having to look after the boys and see to their health, he is the one responsible for circumcision. And he was telling me a moment ago that in the last month or two, he has circumcised over 500 initiates in this lodge on the hill. Murundu lodges are huge because they have to accommodate hundreds of boys as well as past initiates who look after them and help to maintain discipline. The girls who bring the food have to remain at a distance, and occasionally some of the past initiates, pretending to be mad, run amok and terrify the girls. The little initiates will now go back to their Murundu hut or circumcision lodge, which is just on the top of this hill. There they will be staying in seclusion for something like another 2 months. So it was quite an outing for them this morning.
But what about Taushila and the other two Kwetas, hundreds of kilometers away at the wild coast? Today is their big day. The long period of isolation at the lodge is over. The concluding ceremony begins at dawn, as the 3 initiates wash every trace of white clay from their bodies. They must be fully cleansed before their proud fathers and other men from the surrounding district come to fetch them.
The hardships they have had to endure at the lodge are over, but they are still not finally recognized as men, so they must be hidden from the sight of women, other relatives, and friends. To ensure this, they are kept under a blanket and surrounded by a herd of cattle. I might mention that until a few years ago, the initiates would have taken part in a most spectacular dance, dressed in wide ballerina-like skirts and masks made of palm leaves. This dance used to be the climax to the whole Kweta ceremony, but the practice has disappeared in most parts of Xhosa territory. In fact, it is only one of several examples of change which has been taking place in traditional practices during recent years.
The Kwetas have returned to the lodge, and the women wait and watch from a distance. The boys' skins are covered in fat to relieve the itchy dryness caused by the white clay which had been worn for the last 3 months. And now, the first of the gifts the initiates will receive. One of the most important, brand new blankets from their fathers. Meanwhile, everything used by the boys during their period of seclusion has been tossed into the hut. Clothing, hunting sticks, eating utensils, everything must be burnt, including the hut itself. As they walk into a new life, the boys dare not look back. It is believed that even one glimpse at the fire will bring misfortune in the future. Taushila and his fellow initiates are taken to a nearby kraal of the local headman. They are ceremoniously welcomed back into the tribe, and at last their mothers, sisters, and female relatives and friends come forward to greet them. More gifts now. Money, pipes, clothing. Everything to equip them for the years ahead, including a great deal of advice and good wishes.
A happy time, a time of reunion and rejoicing. Throughout the day there will be dancing, singing, and the usual mock stick fights. But the three young men are still not permitted to go home. A special hut has been set aside for them. Inside, they will daub their bodies with red ochre, a symbol of their newly acquired maturity. And then they will dress in adult clothing. They will spend the night here in welcome luxury compared to the previous months of hardship at the lodge.
Taushila has left his youth and his childhood behind him. In the scattered ashes of his past, he has learnt the meanings and duties of adulthood. His initiation allowed him to transcend into maturity and has shaped and given substance to his future life as a man. Next morning, it is not Taushila who emerges from the hut. As an adult, he has even been given a new name. From today, he will be called Fudumele. From today, he is a man.
We have seen that initiation conveys young people into a new phase of life. Among some tribal groups, this means that they are entitled to marry. But among those groups where initiation begins in childhood, it means that it is likely to continue in adolescence. Over the years, I've seen initiation undergo change, but what has remained intact are the basic principles. All in all, in the years ahead, there are still stages to go through. For example, a young bride comes under the control of her mother-in-law, and the young husband, who is admitted to the tribal court and sits among the elders, will be allowed little say in the proceedings. Real authority comes to men and women as they approach middle age. And in old age, if one takes into account the experience they have gleaned from life, they gain even more authority and are shown the deepest respect. So if one really comes to think of it, initiation is the beginning of a road which leads to various levels of maturity.
His destiny is as boundless and as promising as his efforts and his imagination will allow. But as a result of his initiation, Fudumele has been stamped with his tribal identity. He will carry the culture and traditions of his people into his future life.